Good afternoon, greetings wherever you are across the United States or around the world. Thanks so much again for joining us. It's wonderful to be back with some old friends and sharing some really impactful information and insights from two major studies on the value of destination marketing organizations. The DMO website importance study was a comparative study of the websites of more than 60 DMOs. It was undertaken for 9+ months during the pandemic, and this was a free study with donated time, effort, and support provided by the wonderful team at Destination Analysts, and with support from our team here at Miles Partnership. We wanted to make this contribution at this unique and challenging time in our industry, and we've got some really wonderful information to share. Plus, we've got the second study. So this is really the first, so you're really privileged, the first look at some insights from the DMA West Visitor Guide Conversion Study. And this was a full year study of visitor guides of more than a dozen convention and visitor bureaus organized by our wonderful friends and colleagues at DMA West and the DMA West Foundation. So a big shout out to them and thank you so much for the support that enabled this. And it was undertaken again by the great team at Destination Analysts and with significant support and sponsorship from Miles Partnership. Now the full results of that study will be coming out in late March, but we wanted to include some initial insights, plus there'll be even more at the DMA West Tech Summit coming up in March, on March the 10th. So two truly impactful studies, and all undertaken, of course, by our old friends and colleagues at Destination Analysts, and we're delighted to be joined by a very familiar face to everyone, Erin Francis Cummings, CEO and President of Destination Analysts. Greetings, Erin, and you've got some really exciting insights to share with us today.
I do. I can't wait. I think the industry will be really happy with these results.
Very good. And we're delighted to be joined by two very old friends and familiar faces, two true DMO professionals from very different but very special destinations. Elizabeth Fogarty is Director of Visit Grand Junction on Colorado's remarkable Western Slope. And a little story, that picture behind Elizabeth of Colorado National Monument, in my view, should be a national park. You can actually see the exact spot where I proposed to my wife. So I dropped the ring, but fortunately not over the cliff. And Elizabeth, just in the, in terms of celebrating the imminent arrival of spring, do you want to share a fun thing you've done in the last week or two?
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Yes, spring is here on the Western Slope. We're considered high desert. So I've been out hiking more regularly now, and the trails are dry. So I've been on my dirt bike as well. It's a great place to enjoy the outdoors.
Very good. And another very familiar face, Heather Lemoyne is Marketing and Research Manager at the State Tourism Office of the great state of North Dakota. Welcome, Heather. And do you want to share your fun and safe activity that you've done in the last week or two in North Dakota?
Sure. Well, it's great to be a part of your panel today. And I don't know that it's the right kind of fun for everyone, but I'm a hockey mom, and thankfully here we've got kids in school and activities happening. And so I've been to a lot of hockey games. It's pretty easy to socially distance and mask up when you're in hockey arenas. We're not. It's never filling the arena.
Yeah, but it's great to see kids back doing activities, etc. So yes, and obviously we've got a brighter outlook as spring approaches across much of the US, and hoping everyone on this call is both safe and well, and things are heading in a good direction in your destination. So our agenda today will be first Erin, sharing those remarkable insights from those two very important studies, the DMO website importance survey and the visitor guide research, a few highlights from that. We're going to run a couple of poll questions to get your feedback on a couple of the critical areas that have been highlighted in the research, and then we're going to move to a panel discussion and Elizabeth and Heather are going to talk about 4 specific areas that came out in the research and some of the examples and practical ways in which they're rethinking, enhancing, changing their websites and visitor guides. And then right at the end there, this number 4, we're really excited about, the State of the American Traveller, which is now 12, 13 years old or more. One of the most important research
15.
Studies on leisure travelers. 15, there you go. And Miles has been sponsoring it for more than a dozen years. So we're launching today. You'll get a first peek at an online interactive dashboard that allows you to look at the results. And that will include the Destinations edition, where there's individual results. I think it's, Erin, for more than 100 destinations that you can customize the view by.
Not quite, just over 60. We'll get to 100.
There you go. Okay, so let's kick straight into it, and let's have a look at the research. I'll come back and we'll have a look at those takeaways, get into the poll questions, and then the panel. So take it away, Erin.
Thank you, Chris. Well, hello, everyone. It's so nice to be online with you. As the proud president and CEO of Destination Analysts, I represent a team of market researchers serving the global travel and hospitality industry with deep insights into audiences, brand, and marketing performance. It's, again, a pleasure to be with you presenting our latest research into the value of official destination marketing organizations and what they provide their communities that they serve, and 2 of their most important assets that they provide to the travel industry and the greater public, and that's their websites and their visitors guides. It's also a great pleasure to acknowledge Miles Partnership for their unwavering support of the destination marketing industry, and in that, their support and sponsorship of both of these research studies. Their support was not simply financial, but intellectual. Chris and your team, I just want to take the time to say thank you so much. Our 2 companies share an altruistic desire to help our industry peers, as well as the mindset of boldness, and I'm grateful to have a partner like you ready to take on new ideas. And of course, I think the audience can always count on our 2 teams for more of this type of research. So on to what the studies found, we all looked for silver linings in this crisis. And fortunately, there were many, despite the pain that we've all been in. But what COVID gave DMOs was a rising position where travelers placed the most trust in them as a planning resource after their own friends and family, and reliance on and openness to DMO resources grew among traveling consumers. So as Chris already iterated, I'm going to share with you highlights from our DMO website importance study that we conducted during the COVID crisis, as well as the DMO visitor guide user and conversion study in that order today. I'm going to start with what we learned about DMO websites. This, again, is a cooperative study of the users of over 60 DMO websites. The genesis of this study was the pandemic crashing down on us, a crisis unlike anything any of us had ever experienced. And we and Miles wanted to help DMOs understand the new reasons and ways people were using the DMO website. But it also ultimately served a critical opportunity to gather information which would forever benchmark the importance of the destination marketing organization. So in addition to benchmarking this critical role that DMOs play during an active crisis like the coronavirus pandemic, we designed this study to understand who, how, and why audiences engage with DMOs and their websites, to measure the value of DMO communication assets, quantify the efforts of DMOs in supporting local tourism and their local hospitality community, develop metrics that DMOs can use to advocate for their organizations, their marketing efforts, and their budgets. And this study was executed through an intercept survey methodology in which a questionnaire appeared on the websites of over 60 DMOs, both nationally and internationally, between May and December of that year, 2020. Over 250,000 survey responses were collected, the aggregate of which I'll be presenting to you today. And for my fellow research nerds online with me today, do note that we weighted the aggregated data by website traffic volume to reflect the overall population of DMO website users. Our survey was also integrated with the site's Google Analytics, giving the DMO further and deeper insights into their various audience segments' behaviors on the site and helping them identify any areas of improvement. Thank you to the over 60 DMOs who participated. It is because of you that the industry has these important benchmarks now. So let's start with audiences. Who uses DMO websites? A diverse set of people use DMO official websites, requiring your organizations and your staff to serve and deliver a massive amount of content and needs. There's those that are at the heart of any community, the local residents. A third of DMO website audience during this crisis period of 2020 was comprised of local residents. And then there's those that curate, foster, and execute the destination's experience, local businesses. About 9% of those using these sites were from the destination's business community. And then there are those that represent significant outside economic generation potential. 85.7% of the non-local audience of DMO websites are potential visitors to that destination. A much smaller, but nevertheless important in terms of the impact that these individuals can make on the economy of a destination are meeting planners, the travel trade, and media. And in addition to these many core audiences that the DMO website has to serve, there are also sub-segments within those audiences for DMOs to take care of through their website communications. This is a demographic profile of the traveling consumers that are using these sites, potential visitors. There's different gender and lifestyle, or not lifestyle, but life stages preferences for the DMOs to manage. I do want to point out the opportunity DMOs continue to have with engaging younger generations of travelers and getting them in the habit of using DMO websites. Users of these sites continue to skew older. What we have learned from the analytics analysis is that millennials also spend less time on these sites. So it's important for our industry to identify what these younger travelers want and provide that content to them. And I think Heather and Elizabeth will have some great ideas to share on that later. All right, looking at the content DMO website audiences are seeking, particularly during a crisis like COVID. Here's how the over 250,000 survey respondents answered. I'll get into the specifics, but what I want you to walk away from this chart right now is that it's a lot of content that people want from DMOs and are asking for from DMOs. And in addition to the normal information DMOs were tasked with providing, there was a whole new onslaught of content around the COVID-19 crisis that people were seeking from these organizations, again, requiring them to serve each individual by an important audience. This research showed that DMO websites provide a valuable service to their local business community and residents during a crisis like COVID. Looking at local businesses who are using these websites, local businesses turn to the DMO not only for content to promote tourism to the community, but advocacy and information related to supporting local businesses. All you DMOs out there were expected to have information available on the nitty-gritty of tourism recovery, from state-level programs to CARES Act funding for your local business community. Turning to the local residents, residents were most commonly coming to DMO websites looking for ideas, activities, and things to do while practicing social distancing and researching activities for themselves and their local family and friends. Let's not let it be forgotten that this is information which encourages economic activity in the community. 2/3 of residents using DMO websites were planning on staycationing. It's another content requirement. And although I do want to show that the staycationing is in decline as we come out of this crisis. So just something to note there. All right, how about the largest segment of travelers, potential visitors, their use of DMO websites? As it's probably no surprise, content on the destinations Outdoor recreational activities, sorry, that's here, rose to the top during this time. Restaurant, hotel, and discount and deal information was highly sought, as well as, of course, the overlay of the pandemic. The coronavirus crisis really illuminated how DMO websites serve as the singular central source for information of key importance to potential visitors. Nearly 1/3 of site users who are potential visitors to the DMO's community were specifically interested in local COVID-19 information, resources, and response. These travelers were most commonly looking for up-to-date operational hours and restrictions, closures of public areas and local businesses, and the current status of shelter-in-place orders, which the DMO offered in one centralized place. I'm sorry, this chart got out of order, so you'll forgive me. I'm going to just go back to it for a second. But I wanted to share with you that DMOs also had to deal with a traveling public that had discomfort and were charged with quelling fears and concerns. So this is showing you the percent of the audience that felt comfortable traveling to the destination of the DMO site they were using, and it's showing it over time through those months, and you can see how that ebbed and flowed. Let me go back ahead here and show you that 1/4 of this audience had to postpone or reschedule a trip to the destination of the DMO site that they were using because of COVID. And they were undoubtedly looking to the DMO as a resource around this. A really important finding, while over half of these travelers had already made their decision to visit that destination, approximately 4 in 10 are still in a state of potential influence. And that really highlights the significant opportunity DMOs can capitalize on to convert these travelers into actual visitors and create significant economic impact for their community. These travelers are by and large planning what they characterize as vacations, so longer trips with, again, important economic impact potential. And finally, let's look at the DMO's business audiences, the meeting planners, travel trade, and media. Similar to potential visitors, local residents, and local businesses, these travel professionals turn to DMO websites for critical destination information. Majority, 60.3% of meeting planners using these sites are currently considering the destination whose websites that they're accessing for an upcoming event or program. These planners are using the DMO website. We found an average of 6.4 months in advance of the program or event they are planning. Meeting planners express the most interest in destination information on hotels, no surprise there. In addition, restaurants and dining and COVID-19 resources were amongst meeting planners' top destination content of interest during this crisis. Specific to COVID-19 resources, meeting planners were commonly looking for up-to-date operational hours for local businesses and public spaces, as well as the current status of health orders. Airport updates were also important to them. They sought after by meeting planners much more highly than other business segments. Like meeting planners, the vast majority of travel trade professionals who use DMO websites are considering the respective destination for a tour package or itinerary. As such, content that would potentially help in the development of itineraries, hotels and accommodations, restaurants, and outdoor recreation are key, with half or more of travel trade report being really interested in this type of information on the DMO site. And journalists and members of the media, another professional segment that we know can create enormous interest in and visitation to destinations. These folks use DMO websites largely in search of story ideas and information on what's new in the destination. The DMO providing these, along with attractive photos and videos, are very well responsible for a destination's earned media coverage and ultimately influence incremental visitation. So yes, DMOs are required to serve large and diverse audiences and have massive content requirements and responsibilities put on them, and even more so during a crisis. So let's see how their performance was measured and their service appreciated. Across all these audiences, it is seen as important that the DMO is available to offer the information that it does on its website. 80.8% of DMO website users surveyed agreed that it was important or extremely important that the DMO provided the information it did. the importance of the DMO website is performing particularly well, on the next slide, amongst a local audience. Oops, sorry, thought I had a call out for you there. So this is the importance broken out by the type of audience, and you can see here towards the left of this chart how important the local audience is rating the DMO website. It's also being rated highly by potential visitors as well as the travel trade. And while still receiving high marks overall from meeting planners and media, there's likely some improvement that could be made for those audiences, rating it just a little under where the local residents and potential travelers are. But again, across all these audiences, the DMO website is seen as valuable. An average score of 7.9 on a scale from 0 to 10 when we had all these audiences rate the value of the DMO website. I want to say for potential visitors in particular. And these sites generate excitement among travelers. When asked how excited potential visitors were to come to the destination after using the DMO website, this averaged 7.4 on a scale from 0 to 10. But stats can only go so far in communicating the true value of these websites to their local communities, to travel industry professionals and tourists. So we gave the opportunity in our survey for these DMO website users to write in messages to the DMO and the local tourism industry. And I'd like to read some of these to you now. From a resident, a wonderful web presence where tourists and locals alike can find relevant information to enjoy our wonderful place. Stay vigilant, we will get through this. From a local business, this is my go-to source for information. And from a meeting planner, thank you for doing a great job being active, transparent, and communicative. It helps my job selecting meeting locations and venues so much easier. From the travel trade, I can't wait to bring my cruise groups back. I've been a travel advisor for over 40 years and miss the old normal. You've always supported the industry, and I know we will all survive. And finally, from a journalist, my dream is to help show people that states have so much to offer, and what I've seen on your site is so far is impressive. America is waiting. It's not just a dream, it's a destination. And from a potential visitor, being able to still experience the sights and sounds of the area is great. Your adaptability to the current health crisis and willingness to find a way to keep operations going is a credit to you and your community. All right, hopefully that all made you feel really good. It made me feel good. So let's look at what we know about the usage and importance of the DMO visitor guide now. I'm going to share some of the preliminary findings from our visitor guide readership and conversion study, and that's a cooperative study of 12 DMO visitor guides. This was conducted on behalf of the DMA West Education and Research Foundation. They have been a true leader in pushing forward these studies on DMO assets. This is actually a repeat of a study we did back in 2012. We've also, through DMA West, looked at the value of DMO websites as well as their social media assets in 2014 and 2016. And this research was, of course, supported by Miles Partnership. So, Chris, thank you again. The objectives of this study were to develop a profile of official DMO visitor guide users, identify the content most important to this audience, understand the effectiveness of this planning resource, examine conversion rates, and ultimately estimate the economic impact these visitor guides generate for their respective communities. To do this, we conducted a quarterly online survey of official DMO visitor guide requesters sent to them after they had been sent their visitor guide, with a total of 12 US DMOs participating in the study. And as of now, we've collected just over 3,400 completed surveys between April of 2020 and January of 2021. The study was supposed to look at an annual timeframe of 2020, but of course, with the disruption that COVID caused in March, we've extended the study to additional quarters. It will now conclude at the end of June, and we'll certainly let you know when the final numbers are out, which will include conversion and return on investment estimates of these guides. I'd like to thank all our wonderful DMO participants in this study who represent amazing and diverse travel products across the Western United States, whose willingness to support this project make these important benchmarks available to us all. Let's start with a profile of those who use DMO visitor guides. Demographically, this audience skews slightly female. In terms of marital status, nearly 3/4 are married and 12.2% have children under the age of 18. This is an affluent audience with an average combined household income of just under 100,000. Again, the industry's generational issues arise, visitor guide users skewing heavily towards baby boomers, with less than 10% being millennials. An important insight from this research are the motivations for ordering official visitor guides so that DMOs can understand these better and thus best deliver on the needs and desires of this audience. First, how do requesters learn about official visitor guides? Promotion on the DMO's own website was the most common. Search engine result marketing and advertising also delivered an important percentage of requesters, which really highlights the need for good strategy in this area. Users had several motivations for ordering the visitor guide, with the most common being a desire to review general information about traveling to the respective destinations they ordered guides from, followed by using the guide as an actual planning and booking resource for their upcoming vacation, and to review listings of local businesses in the destination. Nearly 40% also ordered the guide as a trip inspiration source, and 37% ordered the guide so they could take it with them on their actual trip. Also wanted to note that 1 in 5 requesters said they ordered the guide because it is a free resource. This is something that should be very clear on your website if it isn't already, to increase potential visitors' likelihood of ordering your guide and thereby increasing your chances of converting them into actual visitors. Looking at these motivations by generation, it appears that younger travelers are likelier to be ordering the DMO guide earlier in the travel planning funnel by looking to the guide for trip inspiration. They're also likelier to say they ordered the guide because it's free. Meanwhile, Gen X and baby boomer users were likelier to be ordering the guide to review listings, accommodations, attractions, restaurants, and other businesses. Millennial travelers less likely to be motivated by listings. That's probably not surprising to many of you. A large majority of visitor guide requesters did indeed read through the guide. So all the work that you put into curating and organizing this content certainly not done in vain. It's also important to note that 2/3 of requesters also access the digital version of these official guides online. So highlighting again the importance of your user experience there. All right, what is the content visitor guide users engage with most? Well, when ordering the guide, users were specifically seeking out information about attractions in the destination, maps, recreational opportunities, and travel tips, sorry. Just under half were also seeking information about accommodations in the destination, dining, and events. When asked what content they actually read or reviewed, it aligns with the top information they sought out, with attractions, maps, recreation, and travel tips reviewed the most. But note that users are also reviewing more information beyond the content that they originally sought when ordering the visitor guide, with information on tours, shopping, and transportation being viewed at higher rates compared to the percent that said they were motivated to order the guide because of that type of content. One of the ultimate primary objectives of this research will be to gauge the effectiveness of visitor guides in converting the readers into visitors. While this analysis has not yet been done for this 2020-2021 period, it is still useful to look at the metrics that go into this analysis. So given the pandemic, it's unsurprising that far fewer visitor guide users actually took a trip to the destination they got a guide from compared to normal times. In past research that we've done on DMO visitor guides, 2/3 of visitor guide users would ultimately take a trip to the destination they ordered a visitor guide from. In these COVID times, just 17.3% of visitor guide readers took a trip to the destination after receiving the guide. But I think we all still appreciate that travel did happen. And looking at this by generation, millennials were the likeliest to have taken a trip after receipt of the guide. And we know from our ongoing travel and consumer research, we continue to see that millennial travelers skew more towards travel openness and more likely to have trips planned into the future. Although a majority of visitors had already decided to take a trip to the destination when they ordered its guide, 1/4 were at a point of potential conversion, so 24.3%. So they're either interested in visiting but hadn't made firm travel plans yet, or simply considering destinations for a trip. And this group could ultimately be influenced by the guide in making a decision to visit. Amongst this potentially convertible group of visitors, about 9 in 10 reported that the official DMO visitor guide that they read indeed helped them make the decision to visit that destination. And this is critical to assessing the ultimate economic impact these visitors' guides have. And we take that a step further to determine the guide's importance to the destination decision. Nearly 3/4 of those that said the guide influenced them reported that the guide was important or very important to that destination decision. Again, critical to the ROI these guides have. And official DMO visitor guides not only influence the destination decision, but they also affect travel planning tasks and in-market decisions, thereby being responsible for incremental economic activity and support of local businesses. In addition to consulting maps within the guide, visitor guide users who actually traveled to these destinations commonly use that visitor guide to select attractions to visit, restaurants to dine in. 1 in 5 even selected a hotel due to information within that guide. Because we obviously had a drop in the rate of visitation and lest anyone be mistaken about why the rate of visitation wasn't what it should be, let's look at guide requesters who did not end up visiting the destination after they received the guide. So we asked these folks if it was the current coronavirus situation which affected their travel plans, and yes, it was. 2/3 said that it was COVID, not the fault of the DMO or the destination. And amongst this group that said the pandemic affected their travel plans, the vast majority postponed rather than flat out canceled their trip to the destination. It's great news. They still intend to visit. And regardless of whether or not the pandemic affected their travel plans, they're still highly excited about visiting these destinations. They're real enthusiasts. On an 11-point scale from not at all excited to extremely excited, they reported a 9.0 level of excitement on visiting these destinations on average. And getting into feelings and perceptions of these guides, DMO visitor guide users largely express very positive opinions about these guides. Over 80% of visitor guide readers agree that the guide they reviewed had lots of information and that it was attractive. Other descriptions of visitors guides are that they contain useful information for trip planning, they feature great photography, and they have appealing designs. Over half agreed that these guides made them excited about visiting the destination. And if we look at this by generation, we'll see that our older travelers are more likely than our younger ones to say that the visitor guides had a lot of information and that it was relevant to planning a trip. But our younger travelers were likelier to describe visitor guides as having great photography, appealing design, and that the guides made them excited to visit that destination. Amongst those visitor guide users who ultimately took a trip to the destination they ordered a guide from, they saw maps and articles as the most helpful types of content for planning their trip. And while other content types like ads and business listings weren't rated quite as highly as those in terms of helpfulness, still about half or more considered these content types helpful. Another interesting thing by generation, millennials were the likeliest to feel that itineraries in these visitor guides were helpful. Also, they didn't want them, but they were the likeliest to find business listings to be helpful in their trip planning. And aligning with the positive descriptions of the guide and the content within them, nearly all visitor guide readers expressed satisfaction with their DMO visitor guide, nearly 70% giving it a top rating. It was also an important exercise in this research to look at how DMO visitor guide users engage with the other assets the DMO has for travelers. Nearly all visitors also use the DMO website to plan their trip to the destination. They also use the DMO social media assets, particularly Facebook and YouTube. So thank you for being here for the research-based look at the value of DMOs. I'm so thrilled to turn it back over to Chris and our amazing DMO panel for a discussion on the implication and application of these findings. If you'd like daily insights and travel trends from us, you can follow us on social, and you can always find us online at destinationanalyst.com.
Thanks so much, Erin. Some Very powerful and impactful insights there. And I just pulled out a few key takeaways. But before I get to these, just a reminder to everybody, all of the slides, plus the report for the DMO website importance study and a recording of today's webinar will be sent out in an email 24 hours after today to all the registrants for the webinar. Plus, we'll be actually loading up these resources onto our respective websites. So you'll be getting all of those and some very important insights around these are valued assets. And arguably our number one challenge is particularly in key demographic markets, such as younger travelers, a lack of awareness. So working relentlessly on ensuring that both visitors, other professionals, trade partners, media partners, as well as our local residents are aware of your activities and the availability of these resources. Erin emphasised that practical business information is critical on reopening and recovery, and that includes obviously information on your website, through your emails, social channels, etc. Obviously, not typically practical in terms of visitor guides, but also think about the major platforms that are also sharing information on your destination and its businesses, notably Google and Google My Business Listings, Google Maps, of course, Apple Maps, TripAdvisor, etc., ensuring that businesses are working on ensuring that that information, such as opening hours, opening status, is up to date. And we've seen in the research that there's a high degree of integration between website and visitor guide usage. So thinking very much about how that content integrates and how you can get visitors, locals, etc., moving from one to the other. Sharing those resources with visiting friends and relatives, that's going to be absolutely critical in the early recovery and moving on. And then we've got this special challenge of reaching younger and more diverse travellers as well as locals. So thinking about how we can reach out into those environments where, for example, social channels are particularly important. So cross-promoting and highlighting the availability of your website and visitor guide resources there. We've got some short-term challenges with visitor guides we'll talk about, but this provides some really powerful information to evangelise the importance of these resources. Okay, so we want to get that message out to our key stakeholders, our boards, our mayors, our governors, our politicians, etc., about the critical and important role that DMOs are playing. Let's move on to our first poll question. And we want to ask your input around a couple of specific areas. The first one being, what special efforts during COVID-19 have you made to reach out to local residents? Locals, of course, critically important to support businesses during shutdown, during the recovery, and of course, getting them to invite their visiting friends and relatives, as well as their long-term value to really ensure that they feel comfortable in the destination opening up for visitation and in managing your growth. So if you could indicate all that are applicable in terms of special efforts you've made during COVID-19 to reach your local residents. So we'll just give you another 10 seconds or so to answer. Click all those that are applicable. Okay, if we could have a quick look at the results here. So you can see the number one there. I've expanded my social media activities to engage with locals. We just talked about the importance of particularly reaching younger and more diverse audience through social media channels. Second being they've added content onto their website that focuses on locals. And you can see then third and then a close fourth is they've expanded their UGC content from locals on their website and social channels and developed and promoted video content mainly for locals. So that's interesting feedback. Let's move on to the second question before I invite our panelists to join us. What are your plans for visitor guides in 2021? So we've got these short-term challenges, obviously with the business community so hard hit. Advertising revenue might be down, is likely to be down. And of course, many destination marketing organizations, CVBs, have seen their own revenue put under real pressure with bed tax revenue, etc. under pressure. So how are you thinking about your visitor guide in 2021? So if you could pick just one of these, the one that's most applicable in terms of what are you doing, and a shout out again about the DMA West Tech Summit session that we'll be running specifically on visitor guides and ebooks. Okay, let's have a look at the response to this question. So some positive news here. The most significant response is I'm going to be publishing a visitor guide similar to past years, so that's good news. Another just under a third, reducing the size or distribution. So collectively that's approaching 2/3, and then we've got smaller numbers around, see, just under 1 in 5 CVBs temporarily pausing their visitor guide in 2021. And then smaller numbers again, that there's going to be expansion in terms of page count, content distribution, etc. For example, reaching out to locals through visitor guide distribution. So some interesting responses there. Let's move on to our panel discussion with Heather and Elizabeth, and I'll ask them to turn their cameras back on and unmute themselves. Hello, ladies. So thanks again. So why don't we kick it off, and I'll ask you, Elizabeth, to answer this first. What were your sort of top line takeaways about some of the most important sort of value you got from the research? We shared it with both of you in advance. What's your perspective on the insights that came out of it?
Thanks, Chris. We were really excited to see the results. It not only provides us a baseline for us to measure against, but more importantly, it allows us to start investing in areas where maybe we're falling short or we need to increase our content, not just on website or visitor guides, but all of those mentions, Chris, that you highlighted earlier. So this, we really apply the data that we receive from this report and try to expand our strategy to convert additional business. I think staycations also stood out. I think all of us on this call probably embrace that more than we ever have before. And we certainly did that in Grand Junction. At different times, we call it different things. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for over a year now, but at one point it was stay positive, test negative, and we encouraged locals to get outside, socially distance, and stay healthy. And also, this mental health aspect was a big part of the staycation that we were promoting. And then GJ Strong Appetite was a way for us to support the restaurants, including takeout, and then this new initiative we were allowed to do during COVID with to-go cocktails was really helpful as well. I would say really quickly, a secondary value of these staycations was for us to really show locals what we do normally outside the area. So although they kind of know what we do as a destination marketing organization, I think as an industry, we always struggle with that, right? They don't often see our marketing. So the staycation aspect really allowed us to highlight our marketing initiatives, and we were very forthright about it. We shared with our locals that this is how we market. We're marketing to you in the same way. We're encouraging you to take a trail that maybe you haven't taken before through destination management principles. We wanted to make sure our trails didn't get too overly crowded. And I think they really appreciated being a part of our marketing initiatives, and they now have a greater understanding of what we do as a DMO. And I think that will help launch further projects and strategies that we plan to do with the community in the future.
Yeah, a critical point there. And hopefully this has provided an opportunity to introduce ourselves to many locals, as you pointed out, Elizabeth, may not be aware of that they have a DMO. So Heather, what was your feedback on the value of this research?
Well, I can't possibly express enough gratitude to Destination Analysts and all of the corporate partners who have so graciously shared research throughout the pandemic. It has been fundamental to the strategies that we've developed through the past 11 months in really our advertising, our messaging, our timing. And one of the things that I would otherwise have not have realized was how different our market was from some of that national research. We ended last year with website traffic 52% higher than 2019. And that continues to carry into March or into January and February here, we're continuing to be 50% higher. And, you know, it really gave us more of a green light to remain present in the marketplace with the messaging and how you could kind of safely enjoy the great outdoors in North Dakota.
Very good. Yeah, some powerful numbers there, Heather. So let's move on to websites specifically. And I want to ask, again, you, Elizabeth, first, to just talk about some of the practical ways you updated, changed, or expanded your website, both as a result of the COVID-19, but also maybe more recently since we've shared this research with you.
Sure. It started for us with the Roam from Home campaign. We wanted to continue to market Grand Junction throughout the pandemic in a responsible way, knowing that Grand Junction is a fairly young brand when it comes to tourism. We have amazing national monuments and 300 lakes in this community, but many aren't aware of that. So we wanted to market, but be responsible about that strategy. And we created this initially what was called Roam from Home. And we created content on our website then that we also cross-referenced through obviously e-newsletters and social media as well. And initially we had no people in these images. It was strictly just scenery and scenic video. And then depending on where we were in the pandemic, when travel did kind of ease up temporarily, we would change from Roam from Home to Be Inspired. So we were kind of leaning into that next stage of inspirational marketing, but still not inviting. And then at that point, we were adding 1 or 2 people in the images, as you can see here. We also were being very upfront with our locals that we were doing this, which again, we were trying to avoid any backlash, that we were continuing to market responsibly but aggressively nationwide during this time. And this, I think, created trust with our community, that they understood why we were marketing and spending advertising dollars during a time that the tourism industry was in distress. So I think it created trust with our community, and they saw that we were doing this in a responsible way. And we continue to follow safe protocols. And then we obviously reached out to our community, asking them to share photos as well, because we had just encouraged them through the staycations to get outside and enjoy themselves. And then they were a part of it. So it really was full circle and pretty heartwarming over time.
Very good. And Heather, what was your activities around updating and enhancing your website? And I think you wanted to highlight a particular research result.
Yes, yeah. So one of the things that we discovered was that maps are of higher importance than we had previously known, and higher importance for our destination than what was being reported from the national survey. And I'm not really sure why that surprised me, because we know that we're a destination that people just don't know a lot about. The Weather Channel only shows North Dakota when it's, you know, very below zero, but I have no snow in my yard and it's 46 degrees today. So, you know, we're just a destination that people don't know a lot about. But yet it surprised me that maps were of a larger importance in our destination. And so this is not only influencing both content and navigation on our website, but also in our partnership with the North Dakota Department of Transportation and the production of the state highway map. We're working with them to develop more locator maps that orient attractions with historic sites and wildlife refuges, and connecting more like itineraries and scenic drives through mapping on both the site and in printed documents. And so that was one of the really kind of key takeaways for us.
Very good. So let's move on to reaching locals and particularly, I suppose, visitors in the younger traveler and perhaps diverse audience. As we saw from the results, we've got some challenges in terms of reaching both younger and travelers who are African-American, Hispanic, etc. So very quickly, in the interest of time, so we have some time for Q&A. Elizabeth, what are you doing in this area?
We tend to like to take risks and jump on trends. We're careful about this, but we did jump on TikTok in 2019. We didn't spend a lot of time on it, but we knew it was an opportunity to jump on what we thought would be a growing trend. And it certainly has provided us value, especially now that TikTok has more FaceTime than Facebook, and they're now #1. So that data now gives us the opportunity to lean into TikTok even more and really reach the younger consumers. And we link to our TikTok on our marketing e-newsletters to provide us greater visibility as well. And then we also work with our younger, what we call micro-influencer residents, whether it's the university students or young professionals that are moving into Grand Junction due to the quality of life here. And they're writing blogs for us and sharing content on social channels, and they're really representing our destination to the younger consumer we're trying to reach out to.
Very good. And Heather, what's happening in North Dakota in this area?
Yeah, well, we actually launched our first ever in-state campaign last summer. It hadn't otherwise been our focus to kind of motivate those staycations. And we really had a lot of local DMO support in that endeavor. And we saw the North Dakota State Parks and Recreation District had record camping numbers last year, 35% higher than a previous best. And so we know that there's a lot of interest in kind of exploring the home state. And really, we're kind of hoping that we can have continued concerted efforts to promote the trails and the outdoor recreation that's so easily accessible here.
Very good. So let's move on just to the last topic before we go to Q&A, the future of your visitor guide. So again, briefly, if you can share, Elizabeth, what are you thinking about with regards to your visitor guide, both short, but also medium to longer term?
Sure, Chris. We actually were in the midst of a redesign during COVID and decided to double down on our visitor guide. So we added 8 pages. We don't put ads in our visitor guide, so it's a very high-end magazine. We added content about what it's like to live here. The more that we talk about quality of life as part of our DMO messaging, we included 2 blogs from locals that talked about what it's like to be from here and also what it's like to move here. And that's allowed us to use our visitor guide for recruitment purposes. So CMU, the Colorado Mesa University, uses the guide for recruitment. Our larger employers are utilizing the guide for employee recruitment. Our retailers asked for our guides by the caseload now as well. So we've really expanded it to be a tourism piece primarily, but secondarily, we're really leaning into residents using this for their own use, and they're getting a lot of value from it.
Yes, and then finally, Heather.
Yeah, well, I'm sure like most of you, we were sitting at the end of last year, trying to assess what we had in inventory, what was happening with our distribution methods, and really kind of, wishing we all had a crystal ball on what we should do for 2021. But I'm really excited to say that we're doing a custom piece for 21. And this is entirely influenced by our site users and the research that's being shared. This is a smaller version than our traditional travel guide. Like many of you, the reality has been we've lost some businesses. We've got events that we still don't know are going to take place in 21, and so this publication really bridges for us, an uncertain year. Capitalizing on the interest in road trips and safe recreation, and really kind of highlighting some of our must-sees and the best of the best.
Very good. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Heather, for those insights and suggestions and practical examples of what you're doing. Very quickly, 3 additional resources. The DMA West Tech Summit's going to feature a follow-up discussion, debate, and some additional research from the visitor guide conversion study looking at print guides and ebooks, the relative importance and use of each. And we've got a couple of great DMO panelists you can see there, very good friends and colleagues, Ariane from Sonoma, Susan from Visit Austin joining us. So If you want to register for that event, I think it's actually open to anybody. You don't have to be a DMA West member, but there is a cost for that. But please join us. And thanks again for DMA West. And then, of course, Miles has put enormous amount of effort into our COVID-19 educational portal. So there's constant updates there to the research and insights from a variety of partners and resources that you can use. And then finally, we have just summarized in a blog 10 international best practices. Hopefully everybody's aware of the enormous amount of work we put into two major funding studies, one across North America and one working with colleague and partner agencies in Europe on the funding and taxation options and opportunities. So please take a look at those resources, and pretty much every DMO is facing funding challenges. So there's a lot of great resources and ideas. So Erin, very quickly, because we've just now got less than 5 minutes left, you just want to highlight the dashboard, and we'll be following up additional information on how to access the dashboard to all the people who attended today.
Yeah, and there's some great Q&A going on in the chat here, Chris. We'll have to have a follow-up webinar so we can get to everyone's questions. But we're excited to premiere the State of the American Traveler online dashboard. It currently features data from our latest Winter 21 edition, which you can interact with in many ways. We'll be adding historical data soon, but it's got some of the key insights, including current leisure travel behaviors from airline trips to national park visits. If you look on the next couple of slides here, you can see you can access significant historical trends in traveler sentiment to help you communicate the impact and recovery from the COVID-19 and other crises. And very exciting for many of you, we have benchmarks on familiarity, appeal, and visitation for over 60 US destinations, and you can apply several filters to look at the current data, and you're welcome to access that anytime on destinationanalysts.com/stats online. And Chris, thanks again to Miles for their partnership in this.
Very good. So again, we've just had a very quick look at that. There's a lot of enormous information that you can drill into, including 60 odd destinations. In terms of insights, we'll be following up with more information about how to access that interactive dashboard. Just in the few minutes remaining, why don't we just pick out a couple of questions, and if I could have very succinct answers from each of you. So we've got a question here in terms of Elizabeth, and you can also respond here. Can you talk about how you were upfront about why you were continuing to market, and how you sort of justified that to local residents who were feeling, obviously, around safety issues that could be an issue of concern? Oh, you're on mute, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Chris. We were very transparent and upfront about sharing with our residents that we were marketing. However, we shared the messaging wasn't, we were inviting them. So we weren't saying visit Grand Junction. We were saying roam from home, or here's your moment of Zen. So we let our residents know that we wanted to stay top of mind to make sure we were creating a foundation for when travel did open up, we could retarget these people who were home during quarantine, responsibly staying home, but receiving our marketing, being inspired, and then we'll return to a more formal visit Grand Junction when appropriate, which we're still not quite there yet. Our residents know we're not doing a formal invite. We're still in the inspirational phase, but they respected what we were doing. And I think because we shared it so often in our monthly e-news that they trusted it.
Very good. And Elizabeth, Kate's asking, what's your handle on TikTok so we can check out what you're doing there?
Visit Grand Junction. We'd love for you to like us. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. And then Heather, do you have any final comments on that in the last minute or so?
In regards to the perception that locals have on inviting travel, we've just really gotten a lot of support. Again, I think it's because our destination just has approach this and feels quite different about the travel. They recognize the economic impact. And I think one of the biggest roles that we play as a state DMO is supporting all of those local efforts and really trying to provide the inspiration whenever someone is ready to travel and funnel them down to all the providers who can close the sale.
Very good. Well, thanks so much. And to Joni, Terry, and the others who asked questions about visitor guides, I direct you to that DMA West session. We'll be exploring many of those topics. Matt asked about how to engage with DMOs. My suggestion, mate, would be to contact your local DMO, give them a call, connect with them, and you'll find them always helpful and supportive in terms of trying to support what you're doing as a small tour operator. So with that, we're going to have to wrap it up in the interest of time. Thanks so much to Erin and the whole team at Destination Analysts, to DMA West, who supported the visitor guide study, to Elizabeth and Heather for joining us today, and for all of you who gave up your time. Thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe, stay well, and we look forward to catching up with you in person soon. Have a great rest of your day.